Welcome to the WTR Small-Cap Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. In today's episode, I'm being joined by my colleague and WTR Senior Energy Transition and Sustainable Investing Analyst, Peter Gastreich. We will discuss the implications from his recent report, SAF, and the untapped potential of farming, fuel, waste, plastics, forest, and CCS. Good morning, Peter, and thanks for joining again today.
Morning, Tim. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Peter, let's start with the recent news that looks like it may have been a catalyst for your report. A Bloomberg article highlighted that scientists who first developed CCS are now sounding the alarm about over-reliance on carbon removals. What's at the heart of their warning?
Well, thanks, Tim. So, the core message from these scientists is that CCS was envisioned as a backup tool, a way to address unavoidable past emissions, not as a free pass to keep burning fossil fuels. Right now, many countries are making carbon removals like CCS the centerpiece of their climate action plans instead of actually reducing fossil fuels. The scientists believe that this kind of overconfidence, if you will, could delay necessary action, increase our climate risks. Plus, there are real technical and practical limits to how much CO2 we can actually remove this way.
So that's an important distinction, but the report also touched on how CCS could be applied differently in the context of sustainable aviation fuel and ethanol. Can you break down why that matters, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. When we attach CCS to fuels like sustainable aviation fuel and ethanol, we're dealing with biogenic feedstocks, plants that recently absorb CO2 from the air. So when we turn them into fuel and then capture their emissions, we're actually removing CO2 from the atmosphere, potentially achieving what's called net negative emissions. This is fundamentally different from using CCS on fossil fuels, where you're just trying to offset ancient carbon that's been stored underground for millions of years. With fossil fuels, true negative emissions are much harder to achieve, Tim.
That's a pretty cool concept, Peter. So what makes ethanol and SAF so attractive as low carbon options?
Well, these fuels are not only sustainable, they're also scalable, and they're compatible with our current infrastructure. They're basically drop-in fuels. That means we can use them in today's vehicles and planes. Their production is a big benefit to farmers and rural communities by creating jobs and new markets. Ethanol CCS is especially promising because the fermentation process produces highly concentrated CO2, making capture both cheaper and more efficient than with other types of carbon sources.
I'm curious what makes the CO2 capture for ethanol cheaper and by what order of magnitude are those savings?
Well, ethanol is one of the most affordable options for carbon capture and storage because it produces highly concentrated CO2 during production, making it easier and less costly to capture. While CCS can be expensive in sectors with high emissions like power generation and so forth, industries such as ethanol, natural gas processing, and also ammonia production face much lower capture costs, even though their emissions overall are smaller. So, for example, capture costs can range from $20 to $40 per ton for ethanol and ammonia, but can run 50 to in excess of $100 per ton for power generation, steel, and cement manufacturing. This puts ethanol and ammonia, as I mentioned, well within that $85 per ton 45Q federal incentive. So if anyone has questioned why ethanol and ammonia CCS tend to make up most of the new CCS projects in the US, this is exactly why.
Great. So the report also mentions woody biomass waste. Why is this feedstock gaining attention?
Well, waste woody biomass is a real win-win. It's underutilized right now, but using it supports a circular economy, meaning we're turning waste into value instead of letting it decompose or burn in wildfires. Collecting and using woody biomass can make forests healthier, lower fire risks, and provide economic opportunities for rural communities, especially as the paper industry, has been shrinking. Tim, you might be interested in studies from the Argonne National Lab, which concluded cellulosic ethanol can reduce carbon emissions by as much as 80% when compared to gasoline. This is larger than for corn ethanol. Similar to corn, you also have abundant feedstock. As evidence, the Department of Energy estimates the US could produce enough forest biomass to make 2 to 5 billion gallons of SAF every year, and that's all sustainably.
That's funny you mentioned Oregon National Labs, as I used to mountain bike on single track trails around Oregon National Labs in the 90s. So you just took me back a minute. That is impressive. Lastly, what about plastics to fuel? How does this fit into the picture?
Well, plastics to fuel technology takes hard to recycle plastics, things we'd usually send to landfills or incinerate, and turns them into renewable fuels and chemicals. This not only diverts waste, but also replaces new fossil fuel use. It means less drilling. It's a great example of making our waste streams part of the climate solution.
Peter, thanks so much for clarifying these important differences and the opportunities around CCS and sustainable fuels. As a final question, how would you suggest investors could further study opportunities in some of these SAF pathways you've mentioned today?
Okay, yeah, very, very important here. So, companies that we have under WTR coverage with profitable ethanol CCS operations include Gevo, ticker GEVO, and Green Plains, ticker GPRE. Companies with woody biomass waste to fuels projects include Comstock, which is ticker LODE, with its Bioleum Corp subsidiary, and Abundia Global Impact Group, ticker AGIG. In fact, AGIG is pursuing two pathways, so also has plastics to fuel, Tim.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Peter. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, industry specific symposiums, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Small Cap Spotlight Podcast. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Krista Fitzpatrick.